Okay, welcome everyone to Abi Live. Today I have Lindsay Hood. She is an executive coach and she loves helping women break through imposter syndrome. So welcome, Lindsay.
Oh, thank you for having me, Abi.
So if you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you serve and a bit about your business, that would be amazing.
I'd love to. So I am a life and executive coach. And as you said, I specialise in supporting women who are struggling with the imposter syndrome. I got, I suppose, to this specialism because of my own background within this. So I worked within a corporate environment for a really long time and I really loved pushing myself. I loved wanting to progress and take on interesting projects. But what I found was every time I went for those roles, could totally see the possibilities and what I could bring to it. When I got the role, about 3 months into it, I would have this crisis of confidence of, can I actually do this? Am I the right person for this? They've made a terrible mistake. And I would really catastrophize this. I would really build it up in my own mind and be waiting for that manager to come in and tap me on the shoulder and say, yeah, we made a mistake. Off you go. And then, I don't know, probably about 6 to 9 months, it all started to feel better. Couldn't really tell you why. And then probably about 2 years into a role, I'd rinse and repeat. I'd be looking for my next challenge. So I'd keep putting myself through this. And it was only when I made the decision to take voluntary redundancy when it was offered and set up my own coaching practice that I started to train as a coach, and we do a lot of self-development and analysis. Realised that what I've just described has a name. It's the imposter syndrome. And from there, done a lot of that research and realised that actually up to 70% of us struggle with this at some point in our lives. And some recent research from Tresemme would suggest that for women, that number goes up to 83%.
Oh my gosh. When you were just speaking, I instantly had a flashback of starting my first business, then my second business, then my third business, then my fourth business, and each time trying to overcome this thing where I hit a wall basically, and I was just like, no, I don't think this is for me. I can't see results. Maybe I'm not good enough. Okay, I'm just going to try something new. Like, it really took me back to that moment, but instead of acknowledging, like you said, calling it imposter syndrome, not feeling adequate, not knowing that this was normal, that I just kind of gave up and moved on to the next thing, which made me learn some lessons. But at the end of the day, I still hit that wall, but this time I chose to carry on. And I think that is it's so needed to acknowledge that it is a normal feeling.
Exactly, and that's why I always share that statistic, because it was actually Pauline Clance and Suzanne Ives did the original research back in 1978, so this isn't a new thing. And what their original research was around high achieving women who, in an academic situation, when they surveyed them, these women were saying they got there by luck, there was a mistake, that they didn't deserve to be there, that they were going to get found out. And this is kind of where their research, because these women doing amazing things, they had won awards, they, had all these accolades, yet they weren't owning their success. They didn't feel successful. So it's that alignment between what your outer world and your inner world within this. And so outwardly, these women had all this success, but inside they didn't feel it. They weren't, as I said, they hadn't internalized it. And I think that is often where this comes from as well. It's that comparison that we all do, that we look at everyone else, but we're not comparing the right things. We're comparing somebody that is 20 years ahead of us in terms of where they're at with their business, or a completely different business model to what we're trying to set up here. And then we kind of go, well, they can do it, I can't. That means that they're great and I'm an imposter because I can't emulate that.
The one question that really come out then was, why am I so special? Why should I get this success? But then what I've seen is people, when they start realizing that they are special, everyone is special, but before that point they start self-sabotaging because they are on the track to success. They can do it, the results are showing, but they don't feel worthy, they don't feel like they deserve it, so they start self-sabotaging their performance, their track, their success. So what would you say that would really shift you into, or out of, sorry, if you shift you out of the imposter syndrome? Say if you're jumping on a sales call, because that comes up in a corporate world, that comes up, like, you're always selling yourself in some form, whether it's to a client, whether it's to a business partner. But if you don't feel worthy, it's going to come out in that sales call. So how would you really shift out of that to prepare yourself for accepting that success that is going to come to you?
Yeah, and I think so there's quite a lot in there to unpack. So, and I think one thing to say is, if you struggle with these feelings, is to, if I'm totally honest, I don't think there's a cure, which sounds very odd when I'm coach around this, but it's more almost that acceptance of, okay, these are feelings that may come up over and over again. What you can do then is create strategies to overcome them. So exactly what you're saying now, when I'm going into a situation where these feelings may come up, what can I do for myself? One thing I would highly recommend everyone do is create or write down all of the things that they have already achieved, and whether you want to call it a brag book or you know, just a list of your achievements. And it can feel really weird to do, but what it will show you is your own evidence of everything you've overcome. Also, the fact that once you've written things down, it's cementing in your own mind that at one point you didn't know how to do this and you've learned it. And I always use driving as an example. When you first get in a car, you have absolutely no idea. It's all this coordination. Once you've passed your test and you're driving, you can't even explain to somebody how to drive anymore. So what seems so impossible becomes so automatic to you. And you have so many examples of that. Using a computer, using Facebook, you've only got to look at somebody that's really, you know, first tries, and you're like, how are you finding that difficult? That was you at some point or another. And everything you do is the same. So if you think of everything as a skill that can be learned, including sales calls in this particular situation, but mindset as well. How do we actually improve that mindset over time? So kind of, there's probably a lot of work that needs to happen before you get to that sales call, in terms of thinking about all of those achievements, building that up over time, and then potentially before you go on to that sales call is finding what works for you. Potentially that brag book can be that bit where you look and you kind of just have that mental, I can do hard things. And maybe it is something like that, it's creating that mantra of I can do hard things. It's not to say that everything you do has to be easy, but knowing that you can get through this can be really powerful for you. And it's maybe also thinking about your physiology. So when that imposter syndrome, when it starts to come up, it can often put us into fight or flight mode. We kind of go, I can't do this, start breathing a bit, you know, faster, that shallow breath, all of which means we're not getting enough blood and oxygen to the organ we really need it, which is the brain. So we're shutting down the thing that's going to help us the most with that. Sometimes it's also realizing, accepting what's happening and taking a few deep breaths. Doing, I call it the 4-6 breathing. So you breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. Because when we're agitated, we breathe the opposite way. We kind of start to pant a bit. This actually starts to relax your nervous system straight away, which means blood starts flowing where it needs to, away from your fight and flight organs, back up to your brain, so you can actually engage in that conversation. And sometimes it's that reframe. So you say around, I know one thing often for entrepreneurs is there's that feeling that sales is icky. And it's that kind of, oh, I don't want to be a salesperson, and that. And so preparation, you know, beforehand, think about what you're trying to do and think about it. It was actually Alison Edgar who coached me around sales in particular, about Actually, great sales is just great customer service. You're just
Yeah.
putting it out there of what that person needs, and it's up to them if they choose to accept it or not. But if there's a match there, actually the impact of you not telling them about it means they can't move forward in that particular area. You're not actually serving them because you're not telling them about this. So sometimes it can also be that reframing in your own mind of not even necessarily I'm not worthy of this, but actually what is my purpose? If it's to help people in service of them, I have to tell them about what I can offer them.
Yeah, there's two things that really come up then. One is I love using an anchor and a physical anchor. And I think it's so helpful, especially to, like you said, if you're going into a meeting, even if you're in a meeting, something that you could maybe like squeeze your finger and your thumb together or something, like that is what you're saying. And that's the mantra that you're repeating. That's the physical thing you're doing when you're repeating that I can do hard things mantra. So when you're doing it and you're doing your deep breaths and you're holding your finger in a certain way or whatever it is that is your anchor, touching your arm, crossing your hands, something.
I have to do the earlobe.
And I think it really just brings you back, because again, it's something that is subconscious. It is unconscious. You're not consciously thinking, I can't do this, I must do this instead. You're thinking something's going on, I just don't feel good, like something is coming up in my body, I can feel my shoulders hunching over, like I just need to bring them back, put my shoulder blades in my back pocket, something to really like open you up, give you that openness for you to breathe clearly, because you can't breathe well like that. And all these little simple things that really just completely relieve you subconsciously. And I think that's so important. You said about preparing, just being aware of how your body is also preparing.
Totally.
And it would totally shift that, I think, personally.
Yeah, no, totally. And Amy Cuddy's research around using your body, she did an amazing TED talk on it, and her book Presence is amazing. Exactly that. It's that actually she talks about the Superwoman pose,
yeah,
and to give
power
you the
pose.
confidence. Yeah. And then sometimes with Zoom, it actually makes it so much easier because you can do that before you get on the camera. But that feeling, it was shown to last, I think it's for up to about 30 minutes afterwards. So actually holding a strong stance. But equally, you can easily do it the opposite way, in terms of if you slouch forwards, look down, think a sad thought, actually notice what happens in your body. You feel that energy shift. If you do the opposite, as you said, shoulders back, head up a bit, smile, think a nice thought, you physically feel that energy shift. And if you, again, strategies, things like that is when you notice it, you go, okay, I'm preparing for a sales call. It takes me 5 minutes. I do a power pose. I sit up. I think a really nice thought. I've done the reframe. I can do hard things. I've anchored it in. Bam, I'm ready to go.
It's so interesting because I used to be a pole dancing instructor, and I love wearing my pole boots. If I put them on, I feel like nothing can stop me. And it's just a simple little trick that really just, I wouldn't even say it like demolishes that imposter syndrome, but you just forget about it because you feel then overwhelmed with something better to focus on. I remember reading something the other day, and it was a joke, and it was someone saying, oh, I've just stubbed my toe or something. So then someone else comes and punches them in the arm, and they said, why have you done that? It said, because I'm distracting you from your toe pain. Like, why is it any different now if we're taking it from, like you said, this hunched over, shoulders down, head down position, and then you're feeling a completely different person. You feel exposed, and you feel like, well, if I'm exposed, I better be out there, better do good.
And even as we're talking now, as you do that, I feel that energy from you. And so if you think using the sales call, actually you're going in with that really positive energy, in itself, that belief. So people often say, you know, oh, I'll do something when I feel confident, but actually it's kind of the opposite way. You've got to take the action to feel confident.
Yeah.
But confidence, I would say, for people, especially with the imposter syndrome, is what does it actually mean for you? And because often we think of it, I think, as that outward show, and then there's that almost fear again, and sometimes for people of I don't want to be arrogant, I don't want people to think this or that. But actually for me, confidence is about believing in yourself. It's knowing that you can do hard things. It's knowing that you can show up to these situations. It's knowing that you have this inner critic that you've tuned into now, and that you can quieten it, that actually it's an inner critic, but it doesn't mean it's saying the truth. It's just saying something at the moment. And you can refer back to your own brag book and go, no, look, you're saying this, but actually I've got my own evidence that I can do these things.
I've got a couple of friends that have actually, like, before our phone call, we were talking about how I call them nerds, all these bad negative chatterboxes that come in your head, all these doubts. And I know I've got a couple of friends who have either got things on their desk or like a cuddly toy or something they've gone out of their way to buy, to then call them negative Nelly or whatever name, sad Sally, whatever name they wanted to have. So when it does come up, they're right, okay, grab sad Sally. And now they tell sad Sally off and say, you know what, I know that I can do this because I've done this, and you can just go back on the desk. I don't need you near me. There you go. And puts them to one side and moves through it. I love all these really creative ways to acknowledge, because I think the more you suppress it, the more it comes up. Acknowledge what's going on, be super aware, and then just put it to one side. Like you said, it takes you a few times to get used to it. We were born as babies who didn't know how to tie our shoelaces, who didn't know how to dress ourselves, who didn't know how to brush our teeth, all these things, make dinner, like all these things we do every single day that we don't think about, drive. But now we do it completely without thinking. It's just part of our daily routine. And I think the more you do something, confidence comes with competence, which comes with repetitive action or practice. Like, people say practice makes it better. Well, it does. And it's no different here, being aware of what's coming up. You know, say for me, I used to hate, and I still do, it makes me feel uncomfortable, but I do it because exactly what you said earlier, I hate asking people for money. But it's just something that I have to do to be in business, because I know that, one, it makes people more accountable for taking action generally. And two, if I don't offer my product, I'm leaving them in a place of pain, whatever pain is to them. And that is something that I think is more important to move someone else out of pain than my little doubt that's going on in my head in that moment. I think I'm in business to serve. I'm in business to heal. I don't want to do that to them. So I've just got to get over it. Like, that's just something I've got to get over, because it's not going away.
Yeah. And going back to what you said around, the baby analogy, and I always think it's such a good one, because again, we can all walk. And if you think about a baby and how many times they get up and fall over, it's not like they try it twice and go, oh, I'm not a walker, I'll just crawl for the rest of my life, it's fine. But somehow as adults, we think, well, if we don't get it straight away, I'm a failure, I'm going to move on from that kind of thing. So that practice, and as a child, it's totally ingrained in us. There is also no self-doubt as a child. They can't do all these things, but they never doubt themselves. And so self-doubt is something we learn. I'm not quite sure how we learn it along the way, but I think sometimes the education system, the messages we're told. But the positive is, if we've learned it, we can unlearn it. And it's going to take time and effort. But to your point, when we start to become aware of things, and that's a hard bit, we've got all of this going on all of the time. But if we can bring a little bit of consciousness to it, that's when we can challenge it. That's when we can, whether it's using the dolls, it's finding those creative strategies, because I think that is what then helps you overcome this.
I was going to ask you, when do we learn this? Because like you said, I do think that children are the bravest people on the planet. They have no fear. They will keep going, even if it puts them in danger, even if they get hurt, they are still so committed to doing whatever it is that they want to do. So I was going to say, when do we learn this as a time frame? Because it could be school, it could be parents, it could be whatever, but we're letting something that has, say, started in the first 10 years of our life influence the next 80 years of our life. And like you said, if we learn it, we can unlearn it. So is there a way that we can identify or pinpoint certain moments where we can acknowledge that that's where it comes from? That is where I don't feel worthy. Is there something like that?
So if I'm honest, I would say that in itself would veer into more counselling and therapy side of things, which is not what I would be doing. What I would say though is a technique that I would use from a coaching point of view is not necessarily picking out a specific example of that, but it's working through maybe just general things where you've identified, so it's not necessarily a point in time, but things that have happened. And there's like a forgiveness exercise that you can do that kind of works through forgiving the other person, but also forgiving yourself for believing that message, because you didn't know any better. That was just a situation at that point in time, and with the tools that you had, that is what you believed. You now have different tools, so you're choosing to believe something different, so you can forgive them for that lesson, but also yourself for taking on that lesson at that point in time.
I think that's so powerful. That is something so huge, because you could be stuck with this forever if you don't forgive. And why, like, children don't know any better. They are influenced with everything around them. It's not their fault that they have been influenced. And if that's where it comes from, we are all children. We get to forgive ourselves. Like, we get to say, maybe my parents weren't the best parents, but they did the best they could. They didn't know any better. It's generational. They were just raised by their parents who didn't know any better. I'm going to stop this pattern. Like, I can change the game for my family. And that in itself lights me up. I don't know about anyone else, but I think it's important to recognize.
Yeah, and exactly what you said, everyone does the best they can with what they've got at that particular time. And so learning that forgiveness for them and for yourself, because when I say anger is just trying to, is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die kind of thing within this. So
yeah. So if people are willing to acknowledge it, they're in this place where they're like, okay, I want to confront this head on. I want to move through it. I want to make sure that it doesn't eat me up and stop me creating whatever I want to create. What would be, say, like 3 to 5 steps that they could start putting into practice today to really move them into that next stage, whether it be coaching, whether it be breathing exercises? What would they do?
So I think the first thing, as I mentioned, would be around thinking about your own achievements. I think that's a great way to start that reframe of you can do things, because often we get into that mindset of I'm not good enough, I've never been good enough, I can't do this. So you start to break that cycle because you get your own evidence within this. I think another thing would be to acknowledge that you're not alone. Mention the statistics at the start, 70% on average, men and women struggle with this. So often we have this, okay, I'm the only person that feels like this. If you look around your friendship group, potentially that means 7 out of 10 people or entrepreneurs that you know have struggled with this. So that's potentially 7 out of 10 businesses would never have been there if they didn't overcome it, if they hadn't. So they felt it, but they've still moved forward with this. But it's normalizing, if you like, those feelings. I think that's really important for people. And then, as you said, that just maybe thinking about starting to tune in to what's happening for you when you're having those thoughts. Is it a particular thought that's coming up over and over? Is it a particular feeling in the body within that? Because once you've got that, you can then start to think about your strategies, whether that's working with a coach, mentor, friends, or just for yourself. You can sort of self-coach yourself, but until you know what's happening for you, whether it's a thought pattern, a feeling, it's very difficult to kind of move forward with any of that.
I know this has been so much fun. I'm just aware of the time. I know you have a free gift for us, so I would love for you to share a free gift, because I think that's going to help so many people, where it doesn't go away. the more that you grow, it's going to keep growing with you because you've got more responsibility. So how do people manage this? I would love for you to share your free gift.
Okay, so I have a 3-step guide that people can download to help you come up with your own strategies to overcome imposter syndrome. And it's available at lindsayhood.net/free guide.
Amazing. And how would everyone connect with you if they wanted to reach out?
Okay, so I am on Facebook and Instagram under Lindsay Hood Life Coach. Also my website, lindsayhood.net.
Amazing. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I could talk about this forever because it always comes up. And one thing that someone said to me recently is the more you're aware with how your body feels, it can really influence how you behave, because you carry your body every single place that you go. You can't escape it. So when you really start tapping into it and accepting it, you can make miracles. And I think that's so true. So thank you so much for this. And I will speak to you soon.
Lovely. Thank you, Abi.
Bye.
Bye.